Hey guys, welcome back to a new episode of The New Unfiltered. So, the older that I get, the more interested in health I am. I don't know if it was something about turning 25, but all of a sudden now I care about like my skincare routine and what I'm eating way more than I did in my early 20s. So I just got acupuncture and I got it done for a Fearless Friday. And that was what I wanted to do for my Fearless Friday this week, getting back into doing something every week that makes me fearless. I met Debbie Kung, who is the founder of Kung Acupuncture, at a good mutual friend of ours baby shower. And not only does she have like the most amazing skin, I was just like, what do you do that maintains your whole physique as beautiful as you are? And you told me acupuncture, you told me a bunch of other things. But the topic that I really want to tackle today is kind of like fertility and when young women should be thinking about things like getting their body ready if they want to have a kid. You know, should everyone be freezing their eggs if they're single at 30, and how acupuncture can play a role with that. So, Debbie, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Those are great topics to talk about because, once again, I think having information out there is always good to know, especially because a lot of the patients I see end up coming in a little bit later, so probably in their mid 30s to early 40s. And that is usually when, your body remembers everything. So from the day that you have your period through when you decide that you want to actually start getting ready to be pregnant or to have egg retrieval, this is all important that we should have this information at our fingertips. And I don't want to say it's ever too late because it's not, but it does become a little bit more challenging in terms of treating the patient if they wait longer for whatever they're coming in for when it comes to fertility. Even menstrual cycle issues, that's stuff that we can actually, quote unquote, fix if you come in early enough that gives us time to actually get your body back on track.
A lot of people will say, or maybe do say, that things like acupuncture, like all these vitamins, herbal remedies, homeopathic healthcare, which I've always been really into, is just kind of woo woo. Like they shouldn't really believe it, they shouldn't trust it. I mean, what do you say to that?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting observation. I've definitely gotten that feedback too. Well, I would say, this medicine's been around for thousands of years, and there's a reason why it's been around for this long, and there's a reason why whole regions of the world use it daily, and it's been shown, anecdotally at least, to help with a lot of people. There are studies now that shows that when acupuncture is done in combination with, say, IVF, it actually ups the chances of having a baby to full term by 67%.
Why?
So that's huge.
That's huge.
So the idea of acupuncture in general, it's an ancient medicine. It's been around for thousands of years. It just helps to add blood flow and chi flow to that area, to the womb. So a lot of times when we have fertility issues, whether men or women, it's because we're not getting proper blood flow to that area. So think of it as like, like basically like a traffic stop. If everything's congested, there's no like traffic flow that's flowing smoothly, nothing happens. Everything is just stagnant. There's no growth, there's no flourishment, there's no nutrients happening. And so the same thing happens when you think about not having enough blood flow to the areas of concern. So, for example, with fertility, I look at it as like not just a short term issue, but a long term game. You got to play for keeps. And so basically, by the time a woman turns, I would say maybe 18, 19, 20, at that point, she should really start considering, okay, regardless if I want to have a baby, I never know because I'm so young right now. However, if I want to have a baby later in life, I don't want to run into issues. So now is the time to actually start taking care of yourself. And a lot of the things are very much like common sense things that we hear about. Say no smoking, no drinking, get some exercise, get some sleep. But in Eastern medicine, in Chinese medicine, it's actually a little bit more than just that. Those are definitely the fundamentals for having a good health. But it's also our emotional health and our mental health. And there are studies that show that stress on a woman's body, regardless of what age you are, regardless of what you're trying to do, whether it's to get pregnant or not be pregnant, can really impact our fertility. For those of you guys that have had your periods for many years, you probably have had 1 or 2 months where it's off, especially if you've gone through a stressful period of your life. And so this is one way that you can kind of look at is like our body's constantly responding. It's like a feedback loop. Everything we do, there's going to be a reaction to it. And so knowing that, keeping that in mind is, okay, if this month is really stressful, then I expect my period to be a little bit rougher this month. That's kind of like the way that you can look at it, and it gives you some control over how you see yourself and how you see your periods and how you see your fertility coming into it, especially as a young adult coming into into your 20s and figuring out if this is the choice for you, if you do want to have a baby or not a baby. And regardless of having kids, you should take care of yourself anyways, because this can actually impact you later in life through menopause. And I've seen, cases where patients come in and they decide not to have kids, and then they decide that, okay, well, if I'm not going to have kids, I'm just going to live it up, and then they end up really putting their body through the ringer, and then later having a really, really bad menopausal phase. And so, remember, our bodies are constantly regenerating itself, which is it's just a blessing and a beauty of being a human. We don't have to think about it. We're like self-healing machines, but also realize that we do have to be accountable for what we do to it, what we put in it, what we think about. And so these are all issues that I always like to encompass and remind my patients here in my clinic, because it does make an impact on us, how our stress levels are. Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that when you say, menopause was harder for her, it was maybe like excessive drinking. Is it drugs? I mean, what kind of factors?
I mean, it's a bunch of things, not getting enough sleep, just basically drinking more, and alcohol, especially for women. And there are studies now, even in Western medicine, that show that no amount of alcohol is safe anymore, which is really
I've read
upsetting.
those articles, yeah.
Yeah, and from Eastern medicine, we look at alcohol very differently. It's considered toxic heat. So heat in the body, if there's too much heat in the body, we say it's unbalanced. There has to be some heat in the body, but not too much. Too much can actually think of it as like a desert. It dries everything out, and then it really sucks up the moisture. And guess what? Your body turns into an internal swamp. So what happens in a swamp? Nothing. Nothing grows, nothing flourishes, nothing can get done. Everything feels stuck, both physically and mentally. And so that's why we really want to be able to balance out, our lifestyle choices, such as alcohol. Those are one of them, smoking as well. Even recreational drugs can have an impact on our overall health, and what we say yin and yang in Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm.
So you said, I feel bad that I'm 25 now and I only started caring about this very recently. Did you start caring about all these health things around 18 or 19?
Oh gosh, no.
Okay.
I mean, I thought I was impervious. Funny story, I used to work in fashion in New York before I became an acupuncturist. So it wasn't until I was 29 that I decided, okay, I had a very interesting acupuncture experience while I was working in fashion, and it really just changed my life. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. If one acupuncture session can make me feel so good, imagine what it can do for other people. Imagine what it can do for myself moving forward. And so I wanted to kind of spread the gospel of this Eastern medicine. I thought it was just so amazing. And on top of that, it's in my culture, but yet I was never raised that way. So it is kind of like a coming of age story, if you will.
How did you feel after your first acupuncture session?
Oh my God, amazing. I was so calm. I felt like my skin was glistening and glowing. I remember walking into the office the next day, and my boss looked at me and she was like, "Did you get a facial? You look amazing." And I'm like, "No, I just had acupuncture done." I mean, it was the response to it. And here's the thing, for those of you guys listening out there and watching, if for those of you guys that have never had acupuncture done, I mean, it is one of those things where it seems a bit intimidating, right? You're like getting sharp objects put in your body and it's supposed to help you. Like, it seems counterintuitive. However, I will say the needles that we use on you are very, very thin. They're about the width of a human hair. They're inserted strategically and quickly so that if you do feel anything, it disappears. It's like basically snapping a rubber band on your skin. You feel it and it's done. And it does so many incredible benefits, health benefits, like we talked about during your treatment, such as, lowering inflammation, helping with blood vessel dilation. That also helps with releasing nitric oxide, which helps to combat inflammation and pain in the body. It helps to lower brain waves to a theta point, where theta is where your brain goes when it's under hypnosis, under meditation, and now studies show that it also goes there when it's under acupuncture. So it does so many cool things. It helps to release neurotransmitters in your brain, and those are the feel-good hormones that flood your system while you're on the table with the needles. So it helps with dopamine levels. It helps to regulate serotonin, which is the calming hormone. So if you're really undergoing stress or anxiety, serotonin is your best friend at this point. And one side note, which you and I talked about, was serotonin. So the building blocks of serotonin are carbohydrates. So for those of you guys that are on special diets where you're really restricting your carbs, especially as women, I urge you to kind of rethink that. The week before you actually menstruate, that week is the week that you really should be quote unquote carb loading. And I'm not saying eat like a lot of processed carbs, but just be smart about increasing your carb load, because that is what helps to nourish our hormones so that when we are menstruating, that our periods are not as painful, are not as bad, and we can actually help to calm and relieve us. And because the building blocks of serotonin, which is the calming hormone that's made in the gut, is carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are so important to incorporate into our diet, and they're delicious. It's
I
a
have
win-win.
I have such a sweet tooth, so I would always choose like bar chocolate or something over something savory or sweet. So for anyone who's listening and doesn't really care as much about carbs, but is way more into the sweet thing, I mean, how do we counteract and like counterbalance that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you're actually craving for like chocolate during your menstrual cycle, it's usually a lot of chocolate contains a lot of magnesium. Magnesium is a type of mineral that helps to calm the body, relax the mind and the body. So once again, it's kind of a form of serotonin, if you will. It just helps to calm your body so that you're not as stressed, both mentally and physically. But I would say for those of you guys that are craving sweets, it's really interesting. When we diagnose things in Eastern medicine, we look at what you're eating too and what you're craving. And according to what you're craving actually tells us what's going on in your system. So in Chinese medicine, we look at your body as a whole. We call it something called organ pattern diagnosis, which basically means that instead of looking at your body and saying the nervous system or the circulatory system, we say every single organ in your body represents a certain emotion, has a certain flavor attached to it. And so when you are feeling those emotions very strong or when you're craving something, you always want to know, okay, if I'm craving something sweet, it has a lot to do with our organ, the spleen in Chinese medicine. And in Chinese medicine, the spleen is a very important organ. It's a very important digestive organ, and it not only digests food, but digests life as well. And so the emotion that's attached to the spleen is worry and anxiety. So for those of us, most of us out there listening and watching, we all have gone through that, if not going through it currently. We reach for something that's typically sweet. Or for those of you guys that reach for something that's salty, that means you need a little bit more grounding. Salt, and naturally in its nature energetically, is a grounding component. But so is sweet. So that's why you never hear of someone really reaching for anything sour or bitter when they're stressed. It's always something sweet or something salty or a little bit of both. And so the spleen, in Chinese medicine, it has everything to do with also controlling our limbs. If you feel like you tend to bruise easily, if you feel like you've been working out and you're not really getting the muscle tone you want for some reason, it could be that you have a weak spleen. And ways to boost the spleen is very easy. And it's, one of the things I always like to recommend first, if not taking, Chinese herbal remedies, is actually food. So something as simple as sweet potatoes are really good for your spleen. Not only is it sweet, so it helps to curb that craving, but it has a lot of fiber as well, a lot of vitamin C, and the spleen loves foods that are the color orange.
So sweet potatoes,
oranges, tangerines, cantaloupe, things like that really help benefit. Yeah, it's almost too simple in Eastern medicine, but that's the way we do it. We always say more is not more.
Looking back, you said that you got into health really at 29, and I used to work in fashion, so I know that grind and the exhaustion, and I mean the toll on anyone who works in fashion's body is tremendously high, especially in New York. What is one thing you would have done differently?
Oh gosh, a lot. One of the things is probably, get more sleep, that's for sure. But when you're at that age, when you're in your early to mid 20s, I mean, you feel invincible. You could go out drinking all night and the next day be fine. So I think one thing I did do right was eating a lot of leafy greens during that time. I definitely made sure that my diet, and at this point I wasn't studying Eastern medicine. I didn't realize like salads weren't exactly that great for you, which we can hit on in a second if you want. But, I was eating a lot of leafy greens at every meal, drinking green juice, doing things like that. And I think that was my saving grace, was kind of getting me through that in terms of, it is true, like you are what you eat. And in Eastern medicine, we take it a step further. We actually say you are what you eat and how it's prepared. So going back to the salad comments, I told you today, I was like, we do not, in Eastern culture and in Eastern medicine, we do not advocate any kind of raw vegetables, foods, or cold drinks, or cold foods, or anything like that of that nature. Because it goes back to the spleen. The spleen likes warmth. The spleen likes to be dry. Anytime we eat too much raw or cold foods, it creates dampness in the body. Dampness is a form of what we say one of the 6 evil pathogens that invades the body and wreaks havoc. But think of dampness as almost equivalent to like fat, if you will. It's like sluggishness. It slows everything down. It's almost like a swamp. And so if you have too much dampness, it can literally cause phlegm, right? It can cause like congestion. It can actually cause a lot of weight gain too. And so I always tell my patients, if you are going to eat a salad, try not to eat one every day if that's what you do. You don't necessarily have to get rid of them completely, but in terms of you should be eating more cooked vegetables versus more raw vegetables, just in general. And then when it comes to drinking beverages that are cold, I always recommend room temperature or warm, because we are warm-blooded creatures and we are homeostatic, which means that our body tries to maintain a core temperature within a certain range, our blood sugar, our blood pressure. And so anytime we intake something that's a little bit off that scale, it really causes quote unquote impact energetically on the body. And so going back to the spleen once again, the spleen likes it when it's warm. It doesn't like things that are cold. So think of your spleen as your digestive fire, your digestive furnace. And anytime we eat something that's a little cold or a little bit raw, it's equivalent to pouring like a bucket of ice water into a furnace. What happens? Bloating, right? The steam from that, distension, gas, maybe a little bit of pain sometimes. I know before I got into Eastern medicine, when I was working in fashion, I would have like a green smoothie every day because that's what I thought was healthy. And I remember there was some days where I would have it and my stomach would just start hurting. And I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's the same, maybe it's something's going on. But I didn't realize, now looking back in hindsight, it's because my body at that time was just run down from having to work and trying to digest that salad, trying to warm up those cold beverages and food, that all that energy that it could use towards other things like healing my body was used towards just trying to get rid of whatever I had just eaten or drank. So it's one of those things that, you have to really think of it in long term. It may not affect you right now, but I guarantee you, unfortunately, we are all human and we will all experience this at some point if we don't take care of ourselves, that you will have digestive issues later. And so a couple of the ways that you can help with that is obviously eat cooked foods, drink beverages that are room temperature, if not warmer, and also eat and chew your food very slowly if you can. That's the number one
People
thing.
eat so fast.
Oh yeah, I'm still a fast eater.
Yeah.
I think it was from my days being in New York, sitting at the desk, having to get things done, and if you look at other cultures, like say Europeans, I mean, that would be
hours
an abomination.
they eat. They eat for hours.
Yeah, and they're all thin.
Yeah, exactly.
And they eat cheese.
And they eat bread.
Yeah,
so what is
exactly.
that? Is that a cultural thing or what is it?
I mean, they have the most ideal lifestyle in terms of walking, right? They never really sit around per se. They walk after they eat. They also eat 3 square meals, most of them. They don't really snack in between, traditionally speaking. All their food is, their soil there is a little bit more nutrient dense.
Yeah.
They don't really have Monsanto, all that stuff.
So maybe one juice a day, like one salad a day, but not every meal.
Yeah, I mean, ideally there would be no juices or salads, but if you're like most of us, cutting that out, especially when it's so hot out right now, is nearly asking an impossible ask. So realistically, if you can limit it to 1 meal a day would be ideal, and the other 2 meals or however meals that you eat are cooked foods, cooked veggies, a little bit warmer, and you'd be so surprised. A lot of people feel more energetic, less bloated. Some people actually end up losing weight just from how they prepare the foods. So once again, salads and raw foods are not the enemies, it's just how it's prepared.
I'm curious, what is a day in your life? Like, what did you eat yesterday, or what's your plan for today?
Yeah, so I just finished my lunch. I had ordered from this local place called Picnic, which
I love Picnic.
Yeah, it's so good. So I ordered something called the Medi fried rice. So it's like white rice with like cooked vegetables and some sausage, and I added chicken to it. So usually, I try, especially for someone like me that's getting a little bit older, I like to gauge it on the week of the cycle that I'm in, and also how my stress level is. So it does vary day to day. There are some days where I will allow myself a salad or I will allow myself a smoothie, but it's rare, and it's not because I feel so restrictive about it. It's just because I'm feeling better. I know my body can digest it okay without any kind of repercussions. So 9 times out of 10, a lot of people that end up eating or drinking smoothies and salads after a course of, say, over a year of nonstop, they probably will have more of a digestive issue from an Eastern medicine standpoint. Even their stomach acid might actually be a little bit lower, so they might run into ulcers, acid reflux, all kinds of different health issues that stem actually from just the way food
Of
is prepared.
course.
It's pretty nuts. It's almost like too simple once again, but I mean, it really goes far.
And breakfast and dinner?
Oh, yeah. So breakfast, I'll have eggs. So what I do is, because of my lifestyle, I'm always on the run. I try to get some really nice farm pasture-raised eggs beginning of the week, and I boil all of them. So like a dozen I boil, and I just keep them in the fridge. So they're like go-to snacks in the morning. I give my dog one. He loves it too. And then in the morning, if I have time, I'll saute some greens, do a little avocado, a little bit of avocado toast. Sometimes I'll use sweet potato instead of bread. And
Nice.
sometimes, depending on what I have around the house, if I didn't have time to go to the store, whatever's in my freezer, I'll take out and just kind of saute in the morning. So, for most of my breakfasts, I actually eat a lot of savory, like kind of like lunch almost, lunch type of food. Not really the breakfast foods that we traditionally eat in the West, like donuts and stuff like that. Of course, I'll eat that when I'm on vacation, but typically speaking, I find when I have a lot more protein and fat and some greens in the morning, I feel so much better. I feel like my skin is so much better. I just feel more satiated and ready to go for the day.
So what is one thing that someone in their 20s can do right now to make sure if they want to have a family and just live an overall healthier lifestyle, but really like have a family maybe a little like further into their 30s, they're not looking to have kids at 30. What is one health tip you have?
I mean, definitely get your sleep. I mean, that's one thing that I know when you're at this age, because I remember I used to be 24 once too. Sleep was, I didn't think it was anything because my body could survive off of it. But then, your body remembers once again. Your body keeps score and it will catch up with you. So sleep is really crucial. That's the period of time when your body can truly repair itself from the day before, depending on what your stress level is and all that. I would say that. And then also, once again, I'm a big advocate of Eastern medicine. Had I known about it earlier, I would have started way early. But going to see your local acupuncturist, going to try some local Chinese herbs, those things also can help benefit and kind of, make you at your fullest for when it comes to preparing yourself for the future, for whatever that holds for you.
Do you see more women in their 30s having trouble having kids,
Absolutely.
conceiving? And why do you think that
Absolutely.
is?
I think it's a bunch of things. I think it's birth control that we've been on for so long.
I have always been really anti-birth control. I did an
Yeah.
episode a while ago about that.
Yeah, I personally have not. I've been on birth control maybe once in my life, and that was for 2 months actually, and I just did not like it. And there's all these research now that shows that having your period while you're on a birth control is not a true period. I mean, there's reasons why women have their periods. They actually have a study that shows that women live longer than men. One of the reasons why is because we actually get a period every month, and that helps to cleanse us out energetically, physically, and gets rid of excess iron, like accumulation of toxins in the iron, all these interesting things. But I would say, in general, like I think for us as women, we have pollution now. There's so many things going on in our water, in the air, in our food, pesticides, a lot of stress. I think there's a lot of stress for us as women this day and age to do it all, and which there's nothing wrong with, but I think we should all try to achieve to be our best selves. But also with social media, the age of comparison, I mean, there's so much pressure we're putting on ourselves to be everything, and that's added stress that our poor little human souls and bodies aren't really built to sustain long term. So I think it's a culmination of things. I think emotional stress has been a huge play in fertility and in body ailments in general. Eastern medicine definitely believes in that, and I see that in my practice. And it's sad because a lot of, I have such amazing patients. I love every single one of my patients that come through the door, and, I see myself in each of them. Like, yeah, that would be really nice just to be able to have a baby so easily, or be able to have my period so easily and not have to worry about the pain and the suffering. And it's one of those things where my heart goes out to them, and I also know that it's becoming more of a trend. So even out east, I keep in touch with an acupuncturist in Taipei, Taiwan, and we compared case studies occasionally, and they even said, they're like, there's something going on globally with fertility. So, it's not just you out there that's dealing with it. So I don't want you, whoever's listening, to feel like you're alone. I see a lot of new cases now where even I had a new patient come in the other day. She was 28 and she was having issues naturally having a baby.
And you think that's just for what reason?
I think, once again, I think it's like birth control. I think we don't have the long-term studies of what actual hormone control can do to the human body. Remember, the human body is so intelligent. If it doesn't need to work hard, it won't. So if we're providing it with this like false, synthetic hormones every month, you think it's going to keep doing that. It'll take a while. And that's another thing. I have a lot of fertility patients that have been on birth control that they've been off it for a month and like, okay, I want to have a baby in 2 months or 3 months or right now. And I'm like, that's That's a lot. That's a big ask for your body
Hmm.
to do that because your body's really intelligent.
Yeah.
Why would it even try to make those hormones as much if
You
it's being
didn't have
provided
to.
for?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think it's a bunch of things. Absolutely. And once again, stress, environmental pollution, birth control, and also just in general, there's I feel like there is, and not to sound too hippy dippy, but I do believe like EMF waves.
Okay.
I believe like too much of that. Like a lot of us that
Of
carry
course, so
our
bad.
laptops right here, men too, right? We put our phones right here. I feel like that also affects us as well. So it's a culmination of stuff.
Debbie, you have been such a joy. Thank you so much. Where can everyone find out more about your practice or follow you on social media?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So I'm on Instagram at dr.debbie, DEBBIE.Kung, Kung. You can also look me up on my website, kungacu.com. And I'm located in Austin, Texas, downtown. And yeah.
You
So
really help. I feel like I went in and my stomach literally was hurting so bad. I just got my period. I felt so bloated. My stomach literally does not hurt anymore, which is so weird. And I don't believe any of this kind of stuff ever. So I was
Right.
definitely skeptical. But
Right.
also the stuff about fertility. I mean, like I said, when I turned 25, I all of a sudden became so fascinated by all of these trends and what's real, what's not. So you really inspired me.
Oh, well, thank you.
So,
Thanks for coming in and trying it. I
of
mean, I
course.
know it's very intimidating at first if you're not familiar with it,
Mhm.
but I urge you, if you can try it, I think you guys will really benefit from it. So thanks.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. The new Unfiltered airs every Wednesday. And subscribe on the App Store and the podcast Spotify as well, so you can get a notification every time there's a new episode. And I will see you back next week for a new episode of The New Unfiltered.